I felt the snap before I heard it. A sharp, wet crack up my tibia that didn't sound like bone, at first more like a green branch breaking under a boot. I was 3 miles deep into the Grid 47 Alpha sweep. Solo, because Jonah was stuck on a recovery over by Mount Baker, and the county didn't want to pay overtime for a second team. Fine by me. I like the quiet. Or I used to. The radio was strapped to my chest harness, half buried under my rain jacket. I clicked the transmit twice, waited for the burst of static that usually meant someone was actually listening. Nothing. I shifted my weight. Pain lit up my leg like a road flare. I bit down on the inside of my cheek until I tasted copper. Second click. Third. Finally, a voice. Calm. Clipped. Hers. Cascade Life Flight. Go ahead. Elena, I said, breath hitching. It's Nate. Legs trapped. Rock slide. Grid 47 Alpha. Need immediate evac. A pause. I could hear the faint hum of the AW-139 in the background, rotors chewing through mountain air. She was already airborne. Nathan, you're breaking up. I'm not breaking up, I said, louder than I meant to. Legs pinned. I can't move. Send the bird. Another pause. Longer. I imagine her sitting there. Headset on. Eyes on the instrument panel. Jaw tight the way it got when she was thinking too hard. Stand by, she said. Stand by. I laughed once. Sharp and humorless. Stand by wasn't a promise. It was a holding pattern. I'd used it myself 100 times in the Air Force when I didn't want to commit to a rescue because the LZ was hot or the weather was closing in, but this wasn't that. The sky was clear. The wind was manageable. And I was her husband. I waited. 10 minutes. 15. My watch ticked loud in the silence. I tried the radio again. Elena. Status? Static. 20 minutes. I started doing the math. If she was 5 minutes out when I called, she'd be here by now. If she diverted, I'd hear the change in frequency. I didn't. I heard nothing. I switched channels, patched into the general SAR frequency. A new voice came through. Mara Ellison, the day dispatcher. She sounded harried. All units, be advised. Life Flight 2 diverting to priority override. Patient is Derek Vance. Repeat. Priority override. Patient is Derek Vance. My stomach dropped. Derek Vance, her ex-fiancé. The guy she swore was just a colleague now that he'd moved back to Seattle to run his private medevac outfit. The guy who texted her happy birthday 3 weeks ago and then accidentally called her at midnight the week after. I keyed the mic. Mara, this is Nate Cross. I'm the one pinned at 47 Alpha. Why am I getting bumped? A beat of silence. Then Mara's voice. Lower, like she'd turned away from her console. Nate, I logged your call at 1437. But Elena marked it as non-emergent after she acknowledged. Said she'd get to you after the van's transport. After? I said. My mouth was dry. I'm bleeding out here. Mara, I know, she said quietly, but her override stands unless I escalate to the supervisor. And she told me she'd already cleared it with ops. She hadn't cleared it with anyone. I knew our protocols. Priority overrides required dual sign-off. She'd forged it, or Derek had, or both. I killed the channel and went back to Elena's frequency. Elena, I said, voice flat, you're making a mistake. No answer. I tried again. You hear, Mara? You're diverting for Derek? Answer me. Still nothing. I started dragging myself out. The rock slab had shifted just enough that I could wedge my good leg underneath and push. It took 3 tries. On the third, iskramat actual skream, not a grunt, and felt something tear my calf. But I was free. I collapsed onto my side, breathing like I'd run a marathon. I fumbled for the handheld GPS, punched in the coordinates for the nearest logging road. Half a mile, maybe 40 minutes if I crawled. I could do that. I had to. Halfway there, the radio crackled again. Not Elena. Jonah. Nate. You copy? Dispatch says your call was logged but not escalated. You okay? I pressed the transmit. Define okay. Shit. Where are you? Logging road. East of 47 Alpha. Legs messed up. Elena diverted for Derek Vance. Silence on the other end. Then Jonah's voice. Low and pissed. She what? Priority override. I said. Mara confirmed it. Elena marked my call non-emergent after she acknowledged. That's not just a violation. Jonah said. That's a firing offense. If they catch her, I said, they will. I'll make sure of it. I heard the distant thump of rotors. Jonah's bird. Not Elena's. Relief hit me so hard I almost puked. But underneath it, something colder settled in. Elena hadn't just made a bad call. She'd chosen, deliberately, and she'd lied about it in real time. When Jonah's crew landed, I didn't say much. They loaded me into the cabin, strapped my leg, started in 4. The flight medic, some kid named Luis, kept asking me questions I didn't answer. I was too busy replaying the radio chatter in my head. Priority override. Patient is Derek Vance. Back at Harborview, they wheeled me into CT. Elena was waiting outside the bay, still in her flight suit, helmet tucked under her arm. She looked composed, too composed. Nathan, she said. I don't. I said. My voice sounded strange, even to me. Flat, empty. I heard Mara. Her expression didn't change. Derek was critical. Multiple fractures. Internal bleeding. I had to prioritize. You had to prioritize your ex-fiancé over your husband? It wasn't personal. I laughed. Actually laughed. Bullshit. You answered his call before mine. You told Mara it was non-emergent after you already knew what was happening. That's not protocol. That's a choice. She stepped closer, lowered her voice. You don't understand the pressure I'm under right now. I understand plenty. I said, I understand that when I couldn't move, when I was bleeding and alone, you told me to stand by while you flew to him. I did what I thought was right. No, I said, you did what you wanted to do, and now we both know exactly where we stand. She opened her mouth, maybe to argue, maybe to lie again. I didn't wait to find out. I let the meds pull me under, but not before I heard her say one last thing. So quiet I almost missed it. I'll fix this. But some things don't fix. Some things just expose what was already broken. And I intended to find every piece. I didn't stay overnight. The doc wanted to keep me for observation. Concussion protocol. Leg stabilization. The usual song and dance. But I signed the AMA form around 2 in the morning. Jonah drove me home. He didn't say much, which was fine. We'd been on enough wrecks together that silence meant something. Elena wasn't there. Her flight suit was gone from the hook by the door. The house smelled like her shampoo and nothing else. Jonah set my crutches against the kitchen island. You sure you don't want me to call Mara now? Not yet. I said, I want the paper trail first. Paper trails disappear. Then I'll make copies. He nodded, tossed me a Gatorade from the fridge, and left. I sat at the island, cracked the bottle open, and pulled out my phone. I had a contact in the King County Sheriff's SAR office. Karen Voss, a dispatcher I'd worked with on a multi-agency search 2 winters back. She owed me a favor. I texted her 3 words, need dispatch logs. She replied 10 minutes later. Come by at 0800. Bring coffee. I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark, running the radio chatter over in my head. Elena's voice. Mara's voice. The timestamp I'd memorized. 1437. I kept coming back to the same detail. Elena had acknowledged my call before Derek's accident even happened. According to Mara, Derek's medevac request came in at 1442, 5 minutes later, which meant Elena had already decided to bump me before she knew why Derek needed a bird. That wasn't a judgment call. That was a setup. At 8, I hobbled into the SAR office on First Hill. Karen met me at the front desk, already holding a manila folder and a cup of black coffee. You look like hell, she said. Feel like it too. She led me to a small conference room, shut the door, and slid the folder across the table. These are the official logs from yesterday, printed at 0600, before the morning shift purge. You didn't get these from me. I flipped it open. There was my call, logged at 1437, acknowledged by Life Flight 2, Pilot E. Ramirez, Status, non-emergent. Hold for priority override. Then, 5 minutes later, Derek Vance's request. Status, critical. Immediate response authorized. I tapped the timestamp. This is wrong. Karen leaned back. How so? She marked mine non-emergent after acknowledging it, but she couldn't have known his call was coming, unless she did. You think they coordinated? I think she answered his call before mine. That's not coordination. That's a choice. Karen sighed. Nate, I like you, but if you take this to ops, it's your word against hers. And she's got seniority. Clean record. All that. I'm not taking it to ops. I said, not yet. I photocopied the pages. Thanked Karen. And left. By 10. I was back home, sitting at my laptop. I pulled up the audio archives from the dispatch server, another favor. This one from a tech in communications who owed me for pulling his nephew out of a ravine last spring. The file was there. Timestamp 14 hours, 37 minutes, and 2 seconds. I hit play. Static. Then my voice. Rajid Elena. It's Nate. Legs trapped. Rock slide. Grid 47 Alpha. Need immediate evac. Her voice. Crisp Nathan. You're breaking up. Me. I'm not breaking up. Legs pinned. I can't move. Send the bird. Her. Stand by. Then, at 14 hours, 41 minutes, and 58 seconds, for seconds before Derek's official request, a different transmission. Low. Hurried. Male voice. Familiar. El. It's me. I'm going in. If I go down, you're my ride. Promise me. A pause. Then Elena's voice. Softer. I promise. My finger froze on the spacebar. Derek had called her before his accident. He'd told her he was going in, whatever the hell that meant. And she'd promised to extract him. No wonder she'd marked my call non-emergent. She'd already committed to his. I played it again, and again, until the words burned into my skull. Elena came home at noon. I heard the garage door open, the soft thud of her boots on the stairs. She walked into the kitchen, still in her uniform, hair pulled back, face unreadable. You're up, she said. We need to talk. She set her helmet on the counter. About what? I turned the laptop toward her. Hit play. The recording filled the kitchen. My voice. Her voice. Derek's voice. The promise. When it ended, she didn't move, didn't blink, just stared at the screen like it might rewrite itself if she focused hard enough. You heard him, I said, before his accident, before my call was even logged as critical. You promised. It's not what it sounds like, she said. Then tell me what it is. She crossed her arms. Derek called to say he was scouting at LZ for a private transport. It was a courtesy. I didn't know he'd go down. You know, you told him you'd extract him if he did. That's not a courtesy. That's a commitment. I couldn't ignore him. Nathan, he's what? Your ex? The guy you almost married? The guy who still calls you L like your still is? She flinched. Good. I had to prioritize, she said, voice tightening. His injuries were worse. According to who? You? You made that call after you'd already promised the bird. You bumped me based on a conversation that happened before either of us needed help. You're twisting this. No, I said, I'm reading the log. I'm hearing the tape. You told Mara my call was non-emergent. You diverted the aircraft. You let me sit in a ravine for 40 minutes while you flew to him. I didn't let you sit there. She snapped. I followed protocol. Bullshit. Protocol says you triage based on need, not relationships. You triage based on who you wanted to save. She stepped closer, voice dropping. You wouldn't understand. Derek and I have history. Real history. Not just deployments and paperwork. History doesn't leave your husband bleeding in a ravine. I made a choice, she said, one I'd make again. There it was. No denial, no apology, just a cold truth. I leaned back, studied her, really looked at her, the set of her jaw, the way her fingers curled into fists. She meant it. She'd choose him again. All right, I said. She blinked. All right. I repeated. You made your choice. Now I'll make mine. I closed the laptop. Stood slow, using the crutches, and walked to the bedroom. Started packing a bag. Elena followed. What are you doing? Leaving. Where? Somewhere I don't have to justify why I deserve to be rescued. Nathan, save it. I said, you already said everything I need to hear. I grabbed my duffel, slung it over my shoulder, and walked out. She didn't stop me, didn't follow, just stood there in the kitchen, staring at the laptop like it had finally told her the truth she'd been avoiding. I drove to Jonah's place. He opened the door, took one look at me, and stepped aside. Didn't ask questions, just pointed to the guest room and said, "Coffee's on." I sat at his kitchen table, pulled out the logs, and spread them next to the laptop. Jonah leaned over my shoulder, scanning the timestamps. "She's cooked," he said. "Not yet," I said, "but she will be." "What's the play?" I tapped the audio file. "This goes to the state EMS board. Anonymously, let them ask why a pilot prioritized a private contractor over a fellow responder based on a personal call." And then I looked at him. Then I stopped playing defense. I start looking into Derek's operation. See what else he's hiding. Jonah grinned. "Now you're talking." I didn't smile back, because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about making sure no one else got left in a ravine, because Elena Ramirez couldn't let go of her past. And if that meant burning the whole system down to get there, so be it. Jonah handed me a fresh coffee and tossed a manila envelope onto the table. "You're going to want to see this." I peeled it open. Inside were printouts, flight manifests from Derek Vance's company, Cascade Medivac Solutions, half a dozen runs over the last 3 months, all logged as critical care transports, all billed to private insurers at premium rates, all signed off by the same flight nurse. "Who's the nurse?" I asked. "Sandra Keogh, worked with Derek in Phoenix before he moved back. State records show she let her Washington license lapse 6 weeks ago, meaning she's been operating illegally, meaning every transport she's signed off on since then is fraud." I set the papers down. "Derek's building a house of cards, and you're about to blow on it." I didn't correct him, because he wasn't wrong. By noon, I drafted an anonymous tip to the Washington State EMS Oversight Committee. Concise, clinical, attached to manifests, highlighted Sandra's expired credentials, and mentioned potential protocol violations involving life flight personnel. I didn't name Elena. Not yet. Let them connect the dots. Then I called a number I hadn't dialed in years. Marcus Bell, a buddy who ran logistics for a private heli-ski outfit in the Olympics. "Nate," Marcus said, "thought you retired from the sketchy jobs." "Not retired, just selective." "What do you need?" "A fake pickup. Remote site, Olympic Peninsula. Tomorrow afternoon. High-paying client. Urgent medical transport. Make it sound legit." Marcus paused. "You setting a trap?" "Something like that. You owe me a case of Makers." Done. I fed the details to a burner email I'd set up under a dummy LLC. Subject line: urgent. VIP transport request, Olympia Ridge. Body: concise. Professional. Offering triple the standard rate for a rapid response extraction. I CC'd Derek's business address and, for good measure, his personal cell via SMS gateway. 2 hours later, Marcus called back. "Your boy took the bait. Confirmed pickup for 1400 tomorrow. Asked specifically if the LZ was secure." He asked who the client was. "Yeah." I gave him the name you provided. Richard Halpern, real estate mogul. Bad hip, wants discreet transport to Swedish Cherry Hill. "Good. You planning to be there?" "Not physically," I said, "but I'll be listening." I spent the evening cross-referencing Derek's flight schedule with Elena's public life flight roster. Tomorrow at 1400. She was slotted for a routine interfacility transfer, Harborview to ST. Joe's. Standard stuff. Plenty of time to divert if she got a priority override call. I texted Jonah. "Check Elena's schedule tomorrow. 1400 slot." His reply came quick. "Already on it." "She's listed, but dispatch has her on backup only. No primary assignment." Interesting. She was keeping her options open. At 7, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, then answered on the fourth ring. Nathan, Elena's voice. Calm, but with an edge I recognized. The one she used when she was trying to sound reasonable while circling the drain. Elena, we need to talk. We talked yesterday. Not about this. About your little investigation. I sat up. What investigation? Don't play dumb. I got a call from Mara today. She said someone's been asking about Derek's flight logs. Someone using your name. Mara talks too much. She's worried. Nathan, we're all worried. You're spiraling. Spiraling? I fell down a mountain and got ignored by my wife. That's not spiraling. That's cause and effect. A pause. Then, quieter. The board got an anonymous tip today about Derek's operation. Sounds like someone's finally doing their job. Was it you? Does it matter? Yes, she said, because if it was you, then this isn't about what happened on the mountain anymore. This is about you trying to destroy my career. Your career destroyed itself when you chose Derek over protocol. I'm just making sure the record reflects that. You're better than this, she said. No, I said, I'm done being worse than this. There's a difference. I hung up, blocked the number. Next morning, I parked myself at Jonah's kitchen table with a scanner, a laptop, and a pot of coffee. At 13:55, I tuned into the Cascade medevac frequency. Static, then Derek's voice clear. Confident. CME, this is Vance 1, en route to Olympia Ridge. ETA, 12 minutes. I smiled. Hook, line, sinker. At 14:02, Life Flight dispatch came online. Mara's voice. Tense. Life Flight 2, update on your status. We have a priority request from CME for possible backup at Olympia Ridge. Patient is Richard Halpern. I held my breath. Would Elena bite? 5 seconds passed. Then 10. Finally, Life Flight 2 acknowledging. Standing by for further instructions. She didn't decline. She didn't confirm. She was waiting, probably checking Derek's location, seeing if she could justify the diversion. At 14:10, the scanner crackled again. This time, a new voice, State EMS Board investigator, patched into the frequency for a routine audit. All units. This is Investigator Walsh with the EMS Oversight Committee. We are monitoring operations in the Olympic sector for compliance review. Please continue normal protocols. A beat of silence. Then Elena's voice. Tighter now, Life Flight 2. Canceling standby. Resuming scheduled transport. Derek came back online. Irritation leaking through. Life Flight, what's your status? I need that backup. Negative. CME, Life Flight 2 is committed to primary assignment. I leaned back, grinning. She'd felt the heat. The board's presence had spooked her enough to stick to protocol. For once. But Derek wasn't done. At 14:15, he transmitted again. This time on an encrypted channel. I wouldn't have caught it if Jonah hadn't patched in his old PJ decryption gear. Ed, what the hell? I thought we had an understanding. Elena's voice. Clipped. Not now. Derek. The board sniffing around. If they tie this to me, they won't, she said, because I'm not confirming anything. But you need to keep your head down. No more favors. No more promises. This is about him, isn't it? Cross. He's behind the tip. I said not now. The channel went dead. I looked at Jonah. She's cracking. She's scared. He said, scared people make mistakes. Good. I said, let her make one more. I spent the rest of the afternoon drafting a second email, this one to the State Patrol's aviation unit. Short, factual, possible unauthorized coordination between Life Flight pilot and private medevac operator during Olympia Ridge incident. 14:05 to 14:15 today. Audio available upon request. I didn't attach the recording yet, just the thread of it. By evening, Elena was calling again. Different number. I let it ring. She left a voicemail. Nathan, I know you're listening. What you're doing, it's not just hurting me. It's hurting Derek. Yes, but it's also hurting the integrity of the service. People could lose faith in Life Flight. Patients could suffer. Is that what you want? I deleted it. Jonah tossed me a beer. You ever think about just walking away? Every day, I said, but walking away doesn't fix the part where she chose him. It just lets her pretend it didn't happen. So what's next? I sipped the beer. Cold, bitter, perfect. Next, I said, we let the board do what they do. And then we see how far Derek's willing to fall to protect himself. Jonah raised his bottle. To the long game. I clinked mine against his. To the truth. Outside, the sun was setting. Inside, the scanner hummed. Somewhere in the city, Elena was realizing that the walls weren't just closing in. They were being built by her own choices. And I was just getting started. The subpoena arrived on a Wednesday. Not for Elena, for Mara Ellison. Jonah texted me the minute he heard. Grand jury impaneled. EMS oversight. Mara's testifying Friday. I was at a laundromat near Jonah's place, waiting for a load of fatigues to dry. I read the message twice. Then thumb back, get me in the room. Not how it works. Nate, then get me the transcript. Real time. You're pushing it. I'm staying in my lane. She's the one who drove into traffic. He didn't reply for an hour. When he did, it was a single word. Fine. Friday morning. I sat in my truck 2 blocks from the King County Administrative Building. Earbuds in. Phone patched to a secure line Jonah had borrowed from a buddy in the sheriff's IT shop. The audio was patchy, but clear enough. First witness, Mara. State your name and occupation. Mara Ellison, dispatcher, Cascade Life Flight. 7 years. Ms. Ellison, were you on duty on the afternoon of April 12th? Yes. Were you the primary dispatcher handling calls from Grid 47 Alpha? I was. Did you receive a distress call from Nathan Cross? Yes, at 14:37. And how did you log that call? Initially as emergent. Pilot Elena Ramirez acknowledged receipt at 14:38. What happened next? A pause. Paper shuffling. Then Mara's voice. Steadier than I expected, at 14:42. I received a secondary request from Derek Vance of Cascade Medevac Solutions. He reported a critical injury at a separate location. Pilot Ramirez requested a priority override, classifying Mr. Cross's call as non-emergent pending the Vance transport. Did she provide a reason for the override? She stated Mr. Vance was in critical condition and required immediate extraction. Did you verify that assessment? No. The override came directly from the pilot. Per protocol, dispatchers do not second-guess in-flight triage unless there's evidence of misconduct. Was there evidence of misconduct? Silence. Then not at the time. But subsequently? Another pause. Subsequently. I reviewed the audio logs. Mr. Vance contacted Pilot Ramirez via private frequency at 14:39, 2 minutes before his official distress call. He informed her he was initiating a high-risk landing and requested assurance of extraction if compromised. And did Pilot Ramirez provide that assurance? Yes, she said. I promise. I closed my eyes. There it was, on the record. The questioning continued, but I stopped listening. I already had what I needed. Mara hadn't just testified. She'd handed them the motive, premeditation, not panic. Elena had been forced into a split-second decision. She'd been complicit before the first rotor spun. I drove to Jonah's. He was on the porch, coffee in hand, watching the street. You hear it? He asked. Every word. She's finished. Not yet. I said. She's suspended. Big difference. Close enough. I shook my head. Close enough lets her retire with dignity. I want her to feel it. You're still pissed. I'm still clear. I said, there's a difference. That afternoon, Elena called. Again, different burner number. I answered, Nathan, Elena, you're behind this. I'm behind telling the truth. The truth is more complicated than a recording. No, it's not. You promised him a ride before you knew he was hurt. You bumped me because of that promise. That's not complicated. That's a choice. You don't understand the pressure. I understand pressure. I pulled guys out of burning fuselages in Kandahar. I made choices in seconds that got people home. You made a choice in minutes that left your husband bleeding in a ravine. Don't talk to me about pressure. Silence. Then, quieter, Mara testified. She told the truth. She threw me under the bus. You parked it there. Another pause. When she spoke again, her voice was different, less defensive, more hollow. What do you want? Nathan? I want you to stop pretending this was an accident. I want you to admit you chose him. And then I want you to live with it. Is that your idea of justice? It's my idea of clarity. She hung up. No drama. Just a dull click of a connection severed. I didn't celebrate. I didn't feel victorious. I felt empty, like I'd spent so long gearing up for the fight that when the punch finally landed, there was no one left to hit. Jonah came inside, tossed me a beer. You good? I don't know what good feels like anymore. You'll figure it out. I sipped the beer. Cold, bitter, same as always. Later that night, I dug out my old Air Force flight logs. Hundreds of pages. Names I hadn't thought about in years. Guys I'd pulled out, guys I hadn't. I traced a finger down one entry, a medevac in Hellman that went sideways because the pilot hesitated. 3 men died. I'd blamed the pilot then. Now, I wondered if he'd had a derrick, someone he'd promised to protect, no matter the cost. I closed the book. The next morning, I drove to the Cascade Life Flight hangar, not to see Elena, to see the bird. I stood outside the chain link fence, watching the ground crew prep the AW-139 for a training run. The rotor wash kicked dust into the air. I didn't blink. A voice behind me. You're not supposed to be here. I turned. It was Mara, still in her dispatch polo. ID badge clipped to her belt. Just observing. I said, observing what? How fast things fall apart when you stop lying about them. She nodded. Slow. I didn't want to testify. But you did, because someone had to. She was going to keep doing it. Nate, not just with you, with anyone she thought she owed. And now she's on administrative leave. Investigation's ongoing. Derek's license is under review. The board's talking criminal referral. Good. She studied me. You don't look happy. I'm not unhappy. I said, I'm just done. Done with what? Done measuring my worth by whether she chooses me. Done waiting for someone else to decide if I'm worth rescuing. Mara smiled, small, sad. Took you long enough. I walked away. Didn't look back. The hangar, the fence, the bird, none of it mattered anymore. What mattered was the fact that I'd spent years defining myself through Elena's lens. Her approval, her loyalty, her love. And now that the lens had shattered, I could finally see myself clearly, not as a victim, not as a avenger, just as a man who knew his own value. I drove to North Bend, found a realtor, and leased a cabin on a month-to-month. Small, wood stove, view of the foothills. No neighbors, no drama, just quiet. Jonah helped me move. We drank whiskey on the porch that night, watching the stars come out. You ever think about going back to flight? He asked. Maybe. I said, not for Life Flight, not for anyone else's system. My own terms. That's the Nate I remember. I didn't correct him, because maybe that Nate had been buried under years of compromise. But he wasn't gone, just waiting for the noise to die down. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, then checked the message. Single line. No signature. You were right. I'm sorry. I deleted it. Not because I wasn't ready to forgive, because forgiveness wasn't the point anymore. The point was that I didn't need her apology to move forward. I didn't need anything from her. I set the phone down, picked up my glass, and toasted the silence. For the first time in a long time, it felt like enough. The cabin didn't have a landline. I kept it that way. My cell got spotty reception, unless I stood by the south window, which suited me fine. Most people took the hint. 3 weeks in, Jonah showed up unannounced with a 6-pack and a handheld radio. Tossed it onto the kitchen table. What's this? I asked. SAR auxiliary channel. County's short-staffed. They're letting vetted independents monitor during peak hours. Figured you'd want in. I'm not looking for a job. It's not a job. It's a frequency. You can listen. You can ignore. But if something comes through and you're the only one who can respond, at least you've got the option. I didn't touch the radio. You're still trying to fix me. I'm trying to remind you who you are when nobody's screwing with the signal. He left the beer and the radio. I left them on the table for 2 days. On the third morning, I powered it on. Scanned until I hit the familiar chatter of King County SAR, AUX2, routine check-ins, weather updates, the occasional lost hiker near Mailbox Peak. I kept the volume low. Background noise. Nothing more. Until Saturday. Ode, this is Sierra 7. We've got a possible ankle fracture. Grid 22 Bravo. Hiker unable to weight bear. Weather moving in. Requesting closest available for intercept. Dispatch came back. Sierra 7. No units within 20 minutes. Closest independent monitor is NC. At North Bend. NC. You copy? I stared at the radio. They were using my initials. Jonah had logged me in. I keyed the mic. NC. Copy. I'm 15 out on foot. Can be there in 25. Copy. NC. Hiker is male. Early 20s. Disoriented but responsive. Coordinates uploaded. I grabbed my pack. Water, med kit, thermal blanket, trekking poles, and headed out. Didn't rush. Moved steady. The trail was muddy from last night's rain, but my leg held, better than it had in months. Found him halfway up a scree slope, shivering, right ankle swollen to the size of a grapefruit. Kid looked 18, maybe 19. Goatee, flannel shirt, the kind of boots you buy at REI, but never break in. Name's Nate. I said, crouching beside him. You hurt your ankle? Yeah, slipped. Thought I could make the summit before the clouds rolled in. Stop talking. Save your breath. I checked his pulse. Pupils. Asked him 3 questions. Name. Date. Where he was. All clear. No concussion. Just a bad sprain. Maybe a fracture. I splinted it with a sand pad. Wrapped it tight. Gave him ibuprofen. And helped him into a makeshift harness. Can you hop on your good leg? I asked. Think so. Then hop. We're moving. We made it down slow. Halfway, the kid glanced at me. You're that guy, aren't you? I didn't look at him. Which guy? The one who sued Lifelight. Or, I don't know, expose him. My cousin's a dispatcher. Said you were the reason they're cleaning house. I adjusted the harness. Your cousin talk too much? Only when he's impressed. I didn't reply. We kept moving. By the time we hit the trailhead, a county unit was waiting. They took over, loaded the kid onto a gurney, thanked me by name. I waved them off. On the hike back, I realized something I hadn't thought about Elena once. Not during the extraction, not during the wrap-up, not even when the kid mentioned Lifelight. The anger that had fueled me for weeks, months, had cooled into something quieter. Not forgiveness, not indifference, just distance, like a mountain range scene from a plane. Still there, but no longer in my way. That night, Jonah called. Heard you had a pickup. Heard you logged me into the system. Had a feeling you'd answer. Why'd you log me in? A pause. Then, because you're not the kind of guy who lets someone bleed, because he's mad at the world. You proved that to yourself today. I just gave you the chance. I didn't argue. He was right. I hadn't responded because I owed the kid anything, or because I had something to prove. I'd responded because it was what I did, who I was, independent of Elena, independent of the Air Force. Just me. Thanks. I said, don't mention it. Jonah said, literally, don't mention it to the board. They'll try to hire you. I laughed. First real laugh in a long time. A week later, Mara emailed. Short, professional. Investigation concluded. Elena Ramirez terminated effective immediately. Derek Vance's operating license suspended pending criminal inquiry. Thank you for your cooperation. I replied with 2 words. Understood. Regards. No satisfaction. No viternis. Just closure. Elena tried one last time. A letter. Mailed to the cabin. No return address. Inside, a single page. Handwritten. He made a choice. I'd like to say I regret it, but that would be a lie. I regret it at the moment I realized you didn't need me to survive it. That's the part one can't undo. I read it once. fed it into the wood stove, watched the edges curl, blacken, vanish. Winter came early that year. First snow hit North Bend in late October. I woke up to white drifts and a silent forest. Made coffee, booted up the radio. Another call came through. Elderly woman off trail near Rattlesnake Ledge. Hypothermic but alert. I geared up, headed out, brought her in. No fanfare, no recognition, just the work. Jonah visited for Thanksgiving. We ate in cranberry sauce and microwave stuffing, drank cheap bourbon, and argued about whether the Seahawks were actually improving or just lucky. Normal stuff, human stuff. Before he left, he nodded at the radio. You keeping it on? Every day. Good. World needs more guys who answer when no one's forcing them to. I didn't disagree. That night, I sat by the window, radio humming softly beside me. A new call came through. Routine. Minor. Handled by a unit 20 minutes out. I didn't respond. Didn't need to. But I listened. Stayed present. Ready, but not waiting. For the first time since the mountain, I wasn't tuned in to prove a point. I was tuned in because the frequency was clear. No static. No interference. Just the quiet knowledge that I was exactly where I needed to be, doing exactly what I was built to do. Not for revenge. Not for validation. Just because. And that was enough.